Law Matters. Of course it does. Hi, I'm Debbie Moraes, your host and moderator of this program. It's been created to educate, inform, and help you with law matters because the law matters. Understand the law better, and you're in a better position to protect yourself, your family, your business. We provide information and resources that'll help you determine whether or not you in fact need to hire a lawyer. Perhaps you'll be able to handle some issues yourself. If you do decide to hire outside counsel, you'll be better prepared, and as a result, so will they. Of course, the goal is for you to achieve the best possible results, achieve that by saving time, money, and having a good outcome. We want to begin by welcoming and thanking from the Bazar Grasso law firm in East Providence with us today, Jackie Grasso.
Hi, Deb.
Glad you could be with us. We appreciate their lending their insights and their perspectives on the various topics that we tackle. Today, your credit score and what you need to know about it. We're going to debunk myths, talk about the dings, the nicks, the black marks, the things you should know, repairs, what you should know about them, what things you should avoid, tips about how to increase your score, address the discrepancies that come on your report, how to repair those delinquencies or infractions, however they set up. We've discussed bankruptcies before, but there's so many misconceptions that remain that we thought we would tackle it once again. We hope this will help you make more informed decisions as you go forward. It's always tough when you find out, just as you're ready to get the loan for the home of your dreams, that you find out there are some snags and problems along the way. So it's not always all as well as you had hoped, and you're not always likely to get the loan you deserve at the time and the points and the interest rate that you want. So, Jackie, let's start with, before we get into the specifics, credit scores. That's what it's really about. There's credit scores, reports. It's become such a big industry today. It's highly advertised. It's online. It's everywhere. It seems like it was just such a straightforward concept. You pay your bills. Everything's fine. No troubles. You get the loan that you want at the rate you deserve. What's happened? What's going on with all of these Equifax and TransUnions?
Well, let me start with a little history.
Good.
Back in 1956, there were two gentlemen by the name of Bill Fair and Earl Isaacs. They met while they were working together at Stanford University. One was a mathematician, one was an engineer. They formed this company called FICO, the Fair and Isaac Company, which over the years has evolved into Fair Isaac Corporation. What it is, as everybody knows, when they hear FICO score, that's the acronym. These two people developed a formula to determine what your credit score would be and how credit worthy or how much of a risk you would be. The formula is probably the most guarded secret beyond Coca-Cola, the recipe for Coca-Cola. So nobody really knows what it is, but you can get some idea if you do some research on it. So what the creditors do is they use this formula to determine what your credit score is. What is it made up of? Well, as you said before, your credit history. They look at your payment history. They look at the amount of money that you owe, the length of your credit history, how long you've had credit cards out, if you've taken out any new credit, and what types of credit do you have. Do you have credit cards? Do you have installment loans? Do you have mortgages? All of that collectively makes up whatever your credit score is. They range from 300 to 850. Obviously 300 being the worst, 850 being the absolute best.
So I understand that the results that someone might get, they differ wildly based on how those numbers are crunched, and obviously it's impacting on what your outcome is and how someone is deeming your credit worthiness. And I guess there's FICO that's supposed to be the gold standard, as you refer to it, but apparently these Experian, the Equifax, the TransUnion, not that they're bad alternatives, but there seems to be a ongoing discrepancy on any given day when you're calling about it or trying to find out what your scores are through them.
Well, there are three credit bureaus, which you're referring to. There's Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. They all use the same standard, the FICO score. You may see discrepancies, whereas Equifax might have one score, you'll get a score from TransUnion that might be different. The reason for that is Some credit agencies will not report to all three bureaus. If there's something on your credit that you disagree with, then under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, the individual has a right to challenge that, dispute it, and have it investigated. And it's very important that people get a copy of their credit report once per year. And they can do that as a result of federal legislation that was passed in 2003, the FACTA Act. So you can receive one annual report by going online on annualcreditreport.com, and it's one report free per credit agency. So you get 3.
Good to know.
Okay. However, if you want your credit score, then you have to pay for that. And it's typically a nominal amount, $6.50, $7. But if you don't need your credit score, and you absolutely don't need it unless you're applying for credit, then do that annually so that you can monitor what's on your credit. You don't know if somebody's using your credit card. You don't know if something's reported incorrectly. It's always very good, like around January 1st of every year, print it out. If you don't have the internet, you can do it by telephone, and you can also do it by mail.
I think from what I've seen, there are plenty of things that are impacting on it, so I do want to get into that in a minute. But when we were talking about credit scores and the credit reports, these Experian and Equifax and TransUnion, they let you monitor all of the activities. You applied for this loan or that credit card, and you can check and see if even, I guess, there's been a squabble. You've had a dispute with the credit card company, and good for you to know, I guess. So apparently there's an awful lot of interest in these companies now, never mind giving you a report, but also selling you. So I was doing a little research, and I saw FICO score, myfico.com, wanted $495 for the first month and then $1495 a month. If what I wanted was my score, why should I be doing that? And what can you tell us about why we don't need that if that's not the case?
Unless there's something in particular that you need your score for. If you're applying for a mortgage or installment loans, student loans, whatever it is, and you need to know your score in advance, then get your score. But all you want to do is monitor your credit. You want to know that there's accurate reporting, and you want to know if somebody has stolen your identity. You don't need that score. You shouldn't have to pay for it. Okay? If you want it, get it once a year along with the free credit report. As I said, it's a nominal amount, but you don't absolutely need that. So unless you're applying for something, it's not necessary. Now, my Discover card gives me free of charge on my bill every month. My credit score is there. I don't pay for that. So a lot of your credit card companies will offer you that, or even I never asked for it. Just started appearing on my credit card statement.
Great point for you to bring that up. I was going to ask about that because apparently there's some movement to get those FICO scores, the actual score, available through FICA and free. And apparently your bank, and there's one other at the moment, but I guess there's a full court press to have more companies be able to do that so that someone isn't, do I want to say, drawn into what might be an unimportant monthly charge.
People think that they have to pay for credit monitoring. You know, they use the teaser ad, like freecreditreport.com is not free. Okay. You have to enter your credit card number before they'll even give you the report. And it's free for 30 days, but after that they're going to charge you a monthly fee to monitor your credit. You don't need that. Especially, I was talking about Discover, but all of your credit cards will notify you if there's an unauthorized charge or something fishy going on your account. My Discover card, if there's a charge more than $500, I automatically get an email or a phone call from Discover saying your limit has been $500. Not that I can't go over $500, but that's the limit that I set for them to contact me in case they're suspicious. It triggers a phone call. So anytime that happens, I get a phone call or I receive an email from the credit card company letting me know, yep, this is a $500 charge. If it wasn't you, please contact us immediately.
So I mentioned at the opening of this segment that we've talked about bankruptcy before, and certainly you and others do handle bankruptcies. But also I understand there are times when people like you or other lawyers get involved with managing what has become a problem once people start going to try to deal with, what is it, annualcreditreport.com, or they call that 877-322, 8228, good resources for someone if they needed to use that. So why does someone, or when does someone actually reach out to a lawyer to have them intervene in this?
If there's a problem with your credit report, and you've done all you can do to get it resolved.
Such as?
for instance, a stolen identity. It's almost impossible to get that resolved in a reasonable amount of time. You have to follow up not only with the credit bureaus, you have to follow up with all of the credit card companies, make sure that they're having accurate reports. Sometimes lawyers will get involved if there's a violation of the Fair Credit Reporting Act, if the creditor is not complying with that act and not resolving the dispute. Lawyers do get involved. But honestly, you really don't need to get an attorney involved, because you can do it on your own. I mean, at the end of every credit report, they'll give you a summary of the Fair Credit Reporting Act, what you need to do to dispute it, and if the dispute isn't resolved, what you can do beyond that, which is make sure that there's an explanation entered on your credit as to why you yourself disagree with this inaccurate report. But honestly, I mean, unless it's something really, really major, you really don't need to get an attorney involved with something like that.
So perhaps this is a good time to ask you, Jackie, there are so many credit repair companies, .coms and whatever, that will supposedly help you fix it, put up a dashboard for you so that you can monthly, daily, weekly, hourly monitor it. Are you generally saying that if you have the wherewithal, you generally can handle it yourself?
Nobody can repair your credit. You know, if somebody says, oh, I'm going to repair your credit, you give me a monthly fee or you give me one, flat amount, your credit's going to be better within, 30 days. And no one can do that. The only one that can affect your credit is you yourself by maintaining good payment history, making sure your credit report is accurate. You shouldn't have to pay a fee for that. There's no such thing as one phone call credit repair. It's you yourself, making up late payments and closing some credit cards that you're not using. Those are the things that repair your credit.
I was just about to say, let's talk about some of those or debunk some of those myths. So there's a thought that closing out your credit card immediately improves your credit score, and apparently that's not quite the case because it has something to do with debt utilization. And can you give us a quick snapshot of what that means and what we should do about it?
If you're going to close your card, then make sure you do it yourself. In other words, don't have a credit card company close it for you because you haven't used it in 2 years. You want to contact the company and you want to tell them, please close my card. It's going to be closed by consumer's request. So if you see in your credit report it says closed by consumer's request, that means that you yourself did that. That will improve your credit score. If the credit card company just closes it, of course that's going to affect your credit score, because then whomever the lender is going to be concerned, why was this closed? Was there a problem with the card or whatever it is? But I always advise, if you're going to do it, make sure you contact the creditor and make sure that it's reported with a notation closed by consumer's request. So
as I've read about this, it says that when you're closing a credit card, your available credit then
it diminishes.
Decreases.
Yes.
So then lenders might see you, why would lenders then see you as more of a risk if your credit has because the credit has decreased, so they see it's more of a risk?
Obviously, because you're, it's actually kind of hard to figure out, but the amount of credit you have out and the amount that you're looking to borrow, that's part of that formula. So if a loan to debt history is high, your credit score is going to be affected. If it's too low, or if there's really nothing there, there's no credit at all, there are no payment histories at all, then of course your score will be lowered because there's no history. There isn't a history by which they can use to determine whether or not there's a risk.
So if you had late fees and were a laggard in your payments and you decide to close that credit card, that doesn't erase, we should let people know, that doesn't immediately erase your history and the fact that you had been a little bit negligent or whatever.
The things that are reported on your credit are there legally for 7 years. Okay. If it's a bankruptcy, if it's a Chapter 7, it is going to be reported on your credit for 10 years. Most people think it's 7. It's 10 years from the date your bankruptcy case is discharged or closed. If it's Chapter 13, it's going to be on your credit for 7 years. But all credit reporting for all other things are there for 7 years.
Okay. And when people are thinking about getting a loan or another mortgage or whatever, there's apparently a myth that you're to debunk here about being penalized when you check your credit score. Apparently there's a difference between what you do and what somebody else does. Can you elaborate?
You are allowed to rate shop. They call that rate shopping. If you are seeking a mortgage or an installment loan or a student loan and you want to rate shop, do it right before you apply for the mortgage, before you have somebody run your credit. Or if you're going to run your credit, make sure it's done within 30 days of your actual application to the mortgage company. So basically what I'm saying is if you do apply for a mortgage, they check your credit, and there is another inquiry from another creditor, if it's within 30 days of that application, then they're going to ignore that. You're allowed to do that as long as it's not more than 30 days. If you're doing it constantly, if you're always rate shopping and having your credit sort out by different lenders, then that's going to affect your credit.
I guess the distinction, I've never heard this term in this case, but they talk about if you do it and you check with those 3 major credit card companies and you do it once, that's considered a soft inquiry. It doesn't ding it versus...
It's called a rate shop, yeah.
Okay, so...
Yeah.
and
a soft inquiry and a hard inquiry, yes.
And the hard inquiry is the minute the bank or the credit union or the savings and loan goes after it and checks you out to see if you qualified.
Correct.
That makes
Correct.
an impact. How much of an impact?
Well, remember, the formula is this closely guarded secret, so there's so much percentage given to payments, there's a percentage given to the type of credit, there's a percentage given to the amount of inquiries. I would say it's down on the low end. That's my opinion. I would say it's probably maybe a 10% impact, probably not more. But if you're constantly having a lender yourself inquiring into your credit, it is going to impact, because then it looks like, well, gee, you had 22 creditors looking or inquiring by consumer request. Why didn't any of these creditors provide any credit to this person? Now, there's a reason for that, and it does affect the
that makes sense.
the FICO score. Yeah.
Things that can nick your score. Certain things seem obvious, others not so. So in reading about people that are 50 plus, for example, those who might be inclined to be dinged, I guess there are ways for us to help, for you to tell us about preventing them or correcting them. So people are getting divorced. Apparently that can have quite an impact on, I guess now, the baby boomers' credit scores. How does that happen? Is it just a matter of what joint debt you had before the judge decreed it? How does that work, Jackie?
Well, in divorce, as you know, you have to divide up assets. You also have to divide up liabilities. So one person is going to be responsible for a liability, and one person may, by the court order, say is no longer responsible. Or there may be agreement between the parties where husband agrees, I'm going to pay the Visa credit card bill. I'm going to hold wife harmless and not seek any contribution from her. Well, what happens going forward is if husband is delinquent with payments or doesn't pay it at all, defaults, it's going to continue to affect wife's credit, because wife's name is not off that card. You can't get her name off that card, even on an installment loan. A divorce doesn't automatically eliminate your responsibility to the creditor. You have a cause of action in family court. Okay, you can return to family court and sue the ex-spouse for failure to pay the account pursuant to the divorce decree. However, the credit card company, they don't give a hoot about what your divorce decree says. As long as your name is on there,
it'll ding both?
It's going to ding both. Yes, it will. It's going to ding both.
And what about the home that is jointly owned, and Mr. and Mrs. Jones were paying out of their joint account while they're married, and however it was settled in the court, Mrs. Jones has her name still on that mortgage and on the ownership of the house until they transfer. So if he doesn't make the payment, does that also impact on her credit?
Of course it does. As long as your name is attached to that loan, it's there for life. Until the loan is paid off, or God forbid somebody passes away, or what I do with my divorce cases is if somebody's going to buy another out of a piece of real estate, I would ask that the loan be refinanced within a certain amount of time. Typically, it's within 3 to 6 months, if possible. But there are cases where you can't refinance because most of these people are underwater.
Oh.
They owe more than what the house is worth, and in that case, what do you do with it if you can't? Maybe sell it at a short sale or whatever. Try and modify the loan. But there's just at some point you hit a brick wall and your name cannot be removed from that account.
So even sending a copy of that divorce decree?
They don't care.
They don't care.
And Uncle Sam doesn't care. So if you owe the IRS money and you have a provision in your divorce decree that says, nope, my ex-spouse is supposed to pay it, not me, They don't care. It's joint and several liability. Legally, that's what it's called, joint and several liabilities. Unless your name is attached. The IRS does have some provisions whereby you can file for innocent spouse, and if you can prove that the taxes aren't yours, but if it was for joint tax returns, for joint income, you have an issue. They really don't care what goes on in family court.
Good to know.
Yeah.
These days, so many people have issues about their medical bills. I know we've talked about this relative to people becoming bankrupt because they couldn't pay. So if you forget your medical copay, or you were disputing it with the medical office, that apparently can ding your credit. I guess that shows up on a report. What do you do?
Again, you would dispute it. You have to contact the credit bureau.
All of them? All three of them?
All three. Contact the credit bureau. They have 30 days to investigate. You yourself should also send a letter to the credit bureau. Contact the creditor. Send a certified return receipt letter to make sure that it was received. And they have within 30 days, or not more than 30 days, to respond or to resolve it. If it's not resolved, then you have a right to seek further assistance. You can have the credit bureau company put an explanation on your credit report showing that you are disputing it, it couldn't be resolved, but this is your position.
Should you assume that the doctor's office is going to do that for you, or would it be a wiser idea to ask them for a copy of a letter and then let you send that along to the 3 credit card companies? Would that be
You can't assume that the doctor's office is going to do it. They don't have time to do
right.
that.
So
even credit card companies, they're not just going to automatically update your credit.
Right.
What I found in my practice is that very few medical providers will report you to a credit bureau.
Good to know.
When you go into collections and they use a collection agency to collect, then you might see some credit reporting. But at that point, or if they take you to court and they have a judgment against you, a judgment in court is reported on your credit. So it may come from a medical bill, but doctors don't have time to check your credit and report. They don't have time for that.
Good to know. What about as parents, you co-sign for your kids' something loan? What do you do about what do you do to make sure that you don't get dinged if the kid is a little less than responsible?
Make the payments for the child.
That's what you have to do.
I just had a divorce trial, and that really that was a make or break in the case, because we had a 26-year-old child who was not paying $50,000 in student loans, and mom and dad were both co-signers. When you don't pay a student loan, it eventually defaults, and if it's a federally guaranteed student loan, then the federal government has a right of income tax offset. So mom and dad were getting their income taxes garnished, their federal refunds garnished every single tax year because of failure to pay the student loan. And of course, it is a black mark on your credit, unless you can pay it or face the consequences.
It's good to know. I know in reading about this, the prophylactic measure was give your kids 3 to 4 months of what that loan payment should be. Well, that sounds nice if you can, but apart from saying, gee, I think that you're good for it, I'm willing to sign on your behalf and vouch for you, the thought of someone anteing up 4 months of whatever a payment might be these days might not be so easy, we think.
Unfortunately, though, the lenders require co-signers nowadays. So what do? I mean, you have a child who's been accepted to college, and this is their dream to go to this college, and you need a student loan to get there. How do you get in? The college says, or the student loan company says, well, not going to get it unless we get a co-signer. Because an 18-year-old has no credit. So they're starting out with probably that lowest credit score. There's a 300 credit score. And then they want a guarantor, which would be the parent, who most likely has a better credit score.
Do you have some tips about how someone could actually boost their credit scores? Do you have a thought about that?
Make sure your payments are there on time. When you're given a grace period, it's late. Every company will say it's due on the 1st, but we're going to give you a grace period. It has to be here by, on the 15th. A grace period is there for that. They give you a grace period, but if it's due on the 1st, pay it by the 1st. Don't pay it after that, because then if it becomes more than 30 days past due, it's going to affect your credit score.
That's still not considered to be on time?
No. If it's due on the 1st, it should be paid on the 1st.
How many people would know that, Jackie?
Yeah, they don't realize a grace period is there it's a courtesy provided by the lender. Credit card companies don't give you a grace period, but Some mortgage companies will, or finance companies for cars.
So I was asking you for tips to boost your credit. How about young people who don't have credit? What's the best way for them to start to build credit without getting in over their heads?
Get a small credit card. If you're denied, maybe have a parent co-sign for you. If it's a minimum limit, $500, get a small credit card. When you get a job, if you need a vehicle, apply for a car loan.
Is that a good next step to be able to swing your own car?
How much you swing the payment, of course.
How much credit do you need to get your first car loan, though?
Well, nowadays you really don't need much because, as we were discussing before, you know, guaranteed credit. Everybody's approved. If you are a credit risk, then you're going to get a high rate of interest. And a lot of the finance companies are owned by the car dealers, so they take on that risk if it's a way of selling you a car. It's actually a great marketing tool.
It also is a way for them to make money.
A lot of money because they're charging 10, 12, 13% interest on these car loans.
Do you end up getting any better credit rating for having gone through a higher interest rate loan than if you had a lower interest rate loan and were able to pay that off?
I think as long as you're paying it on time,
that's
you're
all
fine.
that matters. Yeah. Is there value in actually keeping a credit card balance? I mean, the way I was raised, if you ended up charging something, pay it off the next month, because otherwise it's saying you really shouldn't have been able to buy that. You shouldn't have bought it because you can't afford it. So buy it and pay it off in 30 days. Is there, on the other side of it, a better idea of keeping some sort of a small balance and showing that you can routinely make those monthly payments? Is that better?
That's okay. That's fine. But if you're carrying large balances on a lot of cards, or even small balances on 15 cards, that's going to affect your credit. Because you also have to, again, your income to debt ratio. If it's high, that's going to affect your credit score.
So young people do end up saying or watching that every email or mail that they get, you can roll over your balance, get this at a lower rate for the first X months or whatever. And if they're trying to build credit, is that a good thing to do while they also get to stave off that payment for, I don't know, another 30, 45 days?
It's not a bad thing to do. If you have multiple credit cards, it's probably a smart thing to transfer the balance to one card, and then you're only paying one card at one interest rate versus interest rate for 5 different cards. It's not a bad thing to do.
So will that make your credit history look better? Your credit rating look better?
Yes.
Good thing to know. In building up a credit history, in the short amount of time we have left, how much of a good scout report do you need? Do you need 7 years of good reporting to have a good credit rating, or can you fix it in 2 years, 3 years?
You can fix it quite quickly. I've had people outside of bankruptcy go from a 600 to a 750. As long as you've made good monthly payments, within a year your credit score is going to significantly increase.
Jackie, thank you. That's been very helpful. Well, we hope that this has given you some greater insight on the things that can nick and ding your credit report, as well as the things that can help fix it and even boost it. We hope that you'll stay tuned to our upcoming segments, because the law matters. The law matters to you. Thank you for tuning in.